All right. Welcome, welcome. Happy Thursday. So today is our first roundtable of the year. So we're super stoked. Today's topic is accounts receivable. Show me the money. So we're going to discuss best practices for invoicing, negotiating payment terms, collections, early payment discounts, templates, just a whole array of things. Please keep in mind that this is an opportunity for us to share, conversate, ask questions, share ideas. Jessica is here with me, and our job is to facilitate and encourage. So we don't have a ton of notes. We're just going to kind of wing it. So we want you guys to think of the next 55 minutes kind of like a buffet. Most people don't eat everything at a buffet. Some of these things might not apply to you now. They might apply to you later. We don't expect you to take everything and do it all, but you may not want to, you may not like it, it may not apply. Just move on to the next one that might. When you have your first speaking part, if you could just do a quick intro about your name, your company, maybe the size of it. I think most of us are in Seattle, but if you're not, that maybe mention that too. You can also use the chat box to introduce yourself, share, ask questions. So with that, I think let's take it away. So we broke this down into a couple sections, and there's about two categories that we're going to spend probably the most time on. So we front loaded those. So I'm going to pass it on to Jessica for the first section, which is understanding ARs. So Jessica, if you want to take it away.
Thank you. So my name is Jessica Besso. I work at Weinstein AU, an architecture firm in Seattle. We have about 30 employees. I've been here, almost 3 years. And my background is in financial management, accounting and finance, budgeting, all those things. So thank you for having me here. And I'm by no means a super expert, so I'm excited to hear your ideas and what's happening in the industry all around in your companies too. So to start it off, what is accounts receivable? What is this thing we call accounts receivable? So most of us bill clients or customers for goods and services. And when you do that, they don't usually immediately pay. Although we might be lucky to have some that do. Just experience that.
Like Carrie.
Every now and then, yeah.
So it's always a joy when people pay right on time. But most of us allow some grace, and that's called a receivable. So you're actually giving credit to your customers to give them flexibility on how they're going to pay, when they're going to pay. So when you do that, it's called accrual accounting. When you have an accrual for your receivable, that means you put it on your balance sheet and you record that asset. So that's some accounting talk for you.
You did beautiful.
And then where do you find accounts receivable? Again, on the balance sheet. Here at the firm, we run what's called an aging report. There's different types of aging that you can do. You can do just your all up monthly. You can run different periods. So there's aging reports. And the last one I have that's most important is who is responsible for accounts receivable. Who do you guys think that is?
I love that question, but
Everybody.
it's everybody's job.
Everybody.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
The poor admins sometimes have to do the nasty, dirty job of trying to collect receivables, but really your project managers, the owners, anyone involved with, making the money is responsible for getting it.
I've found that sometimes it's easier if the project teams ask, because they're coming at it from a slightly different side. Like sometimes it's almost easier because they can just be like, hey, my bookkeeper says that we haven't been paid. What, like they can kind of like put it on somebody else kind of, and it just, I find that it's often quite successful.
That's what we found as well. Sometimes they don't know who we are. So if I'm following up, they're like, I've never met you. But when I pass it on to the PM, he's like, hey, we've got this big set coming up. And I noticed like we've got a really large balance. And you just phrase it the right way and even help them with the template. Like I've got certain templates. So I'll say like, hey, is there something big coming up? And we just kind of like make it seem like a favor to them. Like we don't want to get too far with, this huge set that's coming up and then we're going to add to what's already outstanding. Like, and then also just trying to understand why is it not paid too? Is like, do you need a payment plan, or just kind of just coming from that approach seems to have worked better for us. So does anybody else include their firm president in collections when something is super delinquent, or kind of,
Yeah.
and yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's the heavy, if I
yeah,
because they don't call the client's bookkeeper, they call the client.
yep.
Yeah. That can be very effective. So I try to keep it like it has to be after a numerous attempts because I don't want that to get old. I want that to be the real leverage. If I have to call the big boss in, it's a big deal. And so I try to postpone that until there's a point at which like, okay, it's time. It's time.
That's like the last straw, right?
Yeah. It's like, now we go. Cause the next step is a stop work. So, it's like, we got to do this one thing here. And yeah.
Yeah, totally. One thing I found interesting, when we're talking about where they're located, and it's typically on a balance sheet as an asset. I took a course for business valuations, and it's interesting when they go to value your business, anything past 120 days and sometimes 90, they'll exclude from your assets. And they'll say, you didn't collect it in 90 days. This is actually a liability and it's going to be a likely write-off. You can't count this as an asset. So it actually decreased the value of your firm, which I thought was super interesting. So we always ensure, I'm part of the ownership team at our firm. So we always, when we are asking the PMs, we always mention that too. So it seems to have a little more leverage.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Brittany, did you want to talk about strategies for collecting?
I would love to. I'd be honored. So yeah, I'm super curious everybody's strategies. This section, to me, what it means is just how are we making it easy for people to pay us? I think we've gotten really clever and come a long way since the pandemic. I know our firm has, and other people, with payment plans and accepting credit cards and ACH, bank transfers, using apps. So this is kind of, I think I'm super excited to hear what everybody does. So what strategies are you guys using?
I'll go. We don't accept credit cards because of the whole fees and additional
Mhm.
account to manage and all that, but we definitely have been encouraging ACH and offering that from the get-go with a new client. Like,
Yes.
hey,
Yes.
we can do this. Here's, if you want the information, just let us know. We're happy to help. I think offering it up front, because that
During
upfront
onboarding.
information goes to their accounting side, and they're often the ones most excited about that option. So that seems to help. We've got a number of clients that do the ACH, which is, or EFT, or whatever they want to call it.
Hey, Carrie, I have a
Yeah.
question for you on how you do that. I mean, we do that as well, but I've run into the issue of getting notified when payments are processed. So there'll be like, say, like we get a subconsultant that's, invoice that's been paid by the client, but it's sitting on our account for 30 days before we're actually notified. Do you have a system that you put in place of how to get notified when those?
Most of our clients send out an email.
Okay.
They get like an automated, you've got an EFT pending. It's usually what it says, pending.
Yeah. And I have like a few that set up, but I have a few clients that just never send in a notice. So I kind of had told them, I was like, actually, could you stop doing electronic transfer and go back to checks? Because the ones that I get, I can process in a timely manner, but there's a lot of people that sometimes don't do those.
Yeah. So there's a couple ways we've mitigated that. One is by asking them if they have a certain date that they run payments. And sometimes the bigger clients especially will say, yeah, we always run payments the first week of the month.
Okay.
You know, or the first Friday or the first Thursday or whatever the heck their schedule is. A lot of them have an actual set schedule. And if you know what their schedule is, then you can go check the bank account, you know, a day or two later, and you can feel pretty confident that it's there.
Okay.
Our other strategy is our bookkeeper actually does check our bank account every day.
Yeah.
She just does. That's part of what she does every morning. She logs in and she checks for pending deposits, and you know, she just looks every day as a quick 5-minute overview, and she can see those pending deposits before they actually post. So even if we haven't gotten the email notification, she's seeing it on almost a daily basis. So that was a thing we also just kind of started doing.
Okay.
And you can also sign yourself up for bank notifications depending on your bank, and you can choose like, hey, I just want to be notified when there's an incoming deposit, which I've run into with what you're talking about, Patrick, where people don't notify me, and then I ask and they're like, oh, we don't get those, we can't do it. So I set up an alert and I just get notified, and it's just in real time too. Yeah.
That's a good idea. I haven't looked to see if our bank offers that, but that's a good idea.
Yeah.
We actually outsource we have an ACH processor, and they send us automatic emails when a payment happens. So I sent out an invoice literally an hour ago, got notification within half an hour. It was awesome.
Who do you use?
Pays.
It's a company called CSG Forte, and it's like $20 a month or something.
Okay, I've heard of them.
I think it's for the timeliness. It's
Yeah.
super helpful.
Amazing.
So, do you see Uno had a question on who decides net 30, net 60, net 90? So Uno, if your question is when is the payment due? Well, that's you. You decide when the payment's due. Sometimes the clients will have their own language and they can be a little squirrely about it. Sometimes it's from the invoice date, sometimes it's from when they receive it, sometimes they've got some other pay schedule, and that's in that negotiation of the contract.
Yeah.
But initially you should set that, and by all means I would not set anything longer than net 30. Like, why would you do that from the get-go? Yeah. I don't know about other people, but
Yeah, I'm with you.
yeah.
Harry said something.
Now, I will say there are certain clients you just have to know going in that they're going to be different. For
Yeah.
example, we used to work for the Corps of Engineers. They pay quarterly. They
Oh,
literally pay 4 times a year. And so
oh,
we had to know that going in. And let me tell you, talk about watching your receivables. Oof, those are huge, but the checks are, you know, I mean, like, but everybody has to know that. Everybody on the team has to know that they're going to pay 4 times a year, and you all have to be on board with that, or else you just can't get into that kind of contract. So you
totally.
should start with your net 30, but be aware that sometimes you don't get to dictate that. Yeah.
I love that you said that, because that was one of the things for us that really completely transformed our ARs is when we started paying attention to the trends of the clients. And, you know, I had a spreadsheet and it was like, I knew their funding date, and it was like, okay, by the 25th is their cutoff. Okay, by the 20th is their cutoff. And then you just kind of know. But then it was also, okay, we had this massive set going out. So we started doing progress or milestone billing. And so that's really been amazing, because we tend to get in before the funding is cut off. We tend to beat all the other sub-consultants instead of, because they have a process on their end too, right? Like we do to send to them. They have to send it to their PMs. They then got to get it approved. They got to cut the check. So they've got a 2-week lag too. So milestone billing has been amazing for us. We're receiving payments 10 days earlier, sometimes 14.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Paying attention to
Number
those
one
billing.
thing, Brittany, I say, oh, sorry for the echo.
Okay, go ahead. Can't hear you now.
You're on mute now.
I'm gonna talk through Jessica's. One of the number one things I tell sub-consultants who are feeling stressed on payments is when, like, how long our process is. Like, instead of being squirrely about it. It's just like, yeah, it takes me 10 days to get from your invoice to the client. Like that is the
Totally.
reality that we're living in. So if you get me your invoice before the 25th, like it will be included. If you do not, then it's going in the next month.
Yeah.
And, I think
Yeah.
knowing that it's other administrators like doing business just like us, help. I think at first I was so nervous to say that it mattered when they sent me their bill,
Yeah.
that I could just like do it overnight. But now it just works better. And then we have many clients who change their payment behavior in construction. So maybe they were handling and getting an invoice on the 5th of the month, all through design services, but then their funding changes when they get into construction. And all of a sudden they need their bills on the 25th of like the prior month. So I think, just as you're all saying, seeing those trends and just talking with the client about what makes a difference for them on payment has really helped tighten up those timelines.
Yeah. We were always traditional,
Oh.
we'd start the billings on the last day of the month and, like kind of end of the month. And then over time, more and more clients were like, no, we need your invoice by the 20th or the 25th
Yep.
or whatever. So we've had to break up our billing cycle
Yep.
to respond to them so that we're not out a whole extra month, which means all of our subs are out a whole, it's like you have to ask those questions and pay attention.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
just work with the PMs to understand that they're looking at 3 weeks or, however they're looking at their reports, like what time they are looking at
Yeah.
or when milestones happen.
Yeah.
And like Carrie mentioned, like in the onboarding, that's the best opportunity. Like have a template, which I do, and I'm sure most people like include the ACH form, include your process when they typically go out. Do you have a funding date that we need to keep in mind or whatever? And Jessica mentioned something awesome about just knowing your contract, because there are terms in there that could stop you from doing milestone billing. There could be terms in there that stop you from just, you might have a different client in design versus construction. So yeah, you just refer back, you might not be able to stop work. There might be a requirement that you continue to work even if you're not paid. So like, if you don't understand the language in there, grab the PM or your president, take it as an opportunity to learn. But that's always the first place when you have somebody super, super delinquent, I think.
I go back to my square now.
That was quick problem solving though, Evie. That was awesome. The templates are great, and definitely if you can direct that to the right person, the consultant that sent you the proposal is probably not the right person. They probably have a bookkeeper or account or somebody doing the invoicing, although not everybody. It definitely helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody use any apps or services? I know we talked about CSG Forte, so I use Milo. So that's synced with QuickBooks, so they'll send out electronic checks and process ACH, and then it goes directly into our accounting and our bank account, and it seems to work pretty well for us.
We don't.
Not yet.
Mm-mm.
Maybe after this roundtable, you'll be motivated and encouraged.
We'll see. Might have to do some research.
Anybody run into any security concerns with anything they're using? Any hack attacks?
I've had some in the past.
Yeah.
And so, I'm extra careful about verifications with ACH and that kind of thing. I haven't had a problem directly with that. It was more related to a realtor sharing information over the internet unsecured, and that created problems for a principal who then eventually, it links to the corporate account. So watch your back. Yeah. But that's made me extra jumpy with any transactions, watching that account.
Agreed. Wow.
There are we've gotten a couple of emails that relate to electronic payments, and they're
Oh yeah.
they're bad. They're, when somebody's email gets hacked, they can have these attempts to divert those electronic payments. So definitely piggybacking on Renee's comment, be extra vigilant on verifying and pick up the telephone and dial from your own database, their phone number, and, talk to a real person, because there's a lot of not nice people trying to get those electronic payments. So it is worth an extra couple minutes to make sure you're sending your bank information to the right person.
That's always a good
Man.
reminder.
Yeah.
Ooh, what about where does everybody store their checks? Their paper checks? How are you keeping those safe and secure?
The received ones, you mean?
No, the ones that you're cutting, checks that you're cutting, these blank checks with your bank information on it.
Don't those just sit on the partner's desk open? I mean, isn't that how everybody
Unsigned?
else does it? Yeah. Or
Unsigned?
signed, pre-signed,
Waiting to be signed for a week.
Yeah,
I
sure.
remember those days.
I remember those days too. Oh man. Ours are locked in my office with only a couple people have the key, so those should definitely be protected.
For sure.
Man, Renee, I forgot about the pre-signed checks. We used to have some of those. I'm going to be out of town. Let me just sign a few checks for you in case you need them. Oof.
Oh, that's funny.
Oof. Boy, that's
Perfect.
yikes.
Evie reminded me of another strategy we use with getting faster deposits is we have a check scanner with our bank.
Ooh.
So a little scanner that sits at the desk and you can just scan them electronically. And that just helps, faster deposit times. You don't have to physically go down to the bank. So for those physical checks that everyone still receives, it's kind of nice to have something in the office to be able to process those.
And the bank accepts them. There's usually no delay or no hold. Whereas if you deal with a paper check, otherwise there's often a hold.
Ooh, I love that you mentioned that because we have that too. And our bank also has a deposit box. So like if I were gonna be out for a month, because I moved to Costa Rica or whatever it might be, I can send out notifications to the clients and say, hey, I'll be out for a month. Can you please send your checks here? And so they could send the checks to the bank and at an address, and it would have like a PO box essentially. The bank will deposit the checks on your behalf. They'll send you a PDF of what was received and deposited, and then you can record it.
Do they must do that pretty quickly then?
It's very fast, and it's usually very cheap. Our bank is like $25 a month. So it's a good option.
Okay. I've seen clients have lock boxes, and that's what they do. Yeah, the lock box receives the payment, deposits the money like same day.
It's fast. Yeah.
Okay.
So
that's a nice option too.
Yeah, that one's an awesome option. You guys are freaking awesome. These are all so good.
I'm waiting for business banking to get on board with the mobile deposits, but I have a feeling that the dollar amounts are probably going to be the limiting factor. They probably don't like some of the dollar amounts that businesses would be doing.
BECU Business Banking does the mobile.
Do they? Okay.
They do.
Nice.
They do. And we've had a problem, I think, with some of the higher amounts, but with your history, it's usually not too much of a problem. Canadian check can't be deposited that way, oddly enough, but
it's good. Yeah, that's good to know. Ours doesn't yet. And they explained it's because of the dollar value, and I'm like, I get it, but
yeah.
Okay.
I use a BEC mobile for the chapters deposits and things.
Yeah.
Granted, again, the size isn't that large, but it does make it very convenient and very trackable.
Yeah.
So
hopefully more banks get on board, or at least start to lift those limits so that it's more feasible. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. But
those scanners, we looked at those scanners that you can have, and there was the cost with having that device and that service that kept us from getting one. But
we had one of those check scanners when Susan was here, and it had a $75 or $75,000 maximum a day.
Oh.
Well,
yeah, that's kind of catchy. Yeah.
Huh.
So there was still like someone's running to the bank because that's not much. And it worked most of the time,
Yeah.
But then she left and that went away. But I thought that was really interesting. 75K.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super strange. I wonder how long ago that was, because I haven't heard of anybody experiencing that
No.
now.
The one we looked at
Um,
didn't have a limit, but it had a
year and a
monthly
half.
fee.
Yeah, it was a monthly fee and it was a year and a half ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bank of America had a setup fee,
Yeah.
but they waived it just to encourage people to do it, especially during the pandemic. So I got in early with a bunch of those. But Umpqua and, well, Columbia just got taken over by Umpqua. Several don't have fees for that because it's advantageous for them. So,
It is.
Yeah.
It is to their benefit. Yes.
They did
and
remove
honestly, with the FDIC limit and all of the concerns with banks, it doesn't hurt to have a second account, a deposit account that you then transfer, you know, especially if it's making your life a ton easier.
Yeah, I say with the banking crisis, everything is negotiable right now, so it's worth an effort, you know, for sure. So wow, so many good nuggets. So anybody else want to touch on any strategies, apps, security concerns before we move on to the really fun part of managing ARs? You guys look so excited. Let's do this, Jessica.
Okay, so how many of you actually outsource the task of managing your AR, or how many of you get the pleasure of doing it yourselves?
I like how you did that. See what you did.
Pleasure.
Oh, pointing. I love it.
Am I pointing in the right box?
Yeah, are you pointing to Carrie? Because it looks like
Yes. Where is she?
Now you're
Where is
pointing.
she?
Now you're pointing to me and Renee. Okay. Now you're pointing.
On my screen, she's there.
Yeah.
I want to point.
But does anyone outsource? It's not as common probably in our industry.
Yeah, we do. We
You do?
lost
Oh,
our
okay.
accountant. So we have an outside accounting firm that handles stuff.
Oh,
And I
okay.
just, I'm sort of the in-office helper bee. You know, I get checks printed, I make deposits, I do those kind of little helper bee things, but I don't do our accounting. It's done by somebody else.
And they do the receivables too.
Yep. I just scan everything off to them and it's kind of nice. I'm not an accountant, so some of these webinars are like interesting to me, but I don't do any of this. I'm just the little helper bee who makes sure things keep running.
It's a big helper bee.
It is a big helper bee.
A little big.
Yeah, money in the bank, checks sent out. I do that part.
Okay, so you guys don't have an in-house bookkeeper?
What was that?
You don't have an in-house bookkeeper then doing the invoicing? Like the CPA does all of that?
Yeah, they do all of that. This firm does all that. The PMs and the principals look over the invoicing before it goes out. And back to the thing about who contacts the client when they're delinquent, they do. I don't. They wouldn't know who I am. I mean, I may send them a W-9, but nobody knows me, and they wouldn't know our accounting firm. So the principals and the PMs, they reach out, and it seems to be easy. You know, they already have the relationship. So.
That is huge.
Good point.
So do you know how they structure getting paid? Are they kind of basing it on a range of transactions that you guys like? Okay, there's 100 transactions a month, or do you have kind of an idea for anybody who's curious?
You asking me? Because I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I don't know. I don't have any idea. Again.
Well, I'll
helper
jump
bee.
in if you want, Carol, and be a
Okay.
helper bee to you if you want. So
Yes,
I'm
please.
Renee Howard, and I've ran my own business doing bookkeeping support for small businesses and architects and engineers for 20 years. But now I work for HRK Advisors and do the same thing for a bunch of their clients. So it's, you know, some of them it's a standard fee, some of them it's an hourly, and it's, you know, sometimes we just do the billing, sometimes we just do payroll, but it's the same kind of thing, you know.
Just however the contract is set up.
Right, yeah. And with so many people working remote or hybrid, we sort of just look like we're part of the firm anyway. which is kind of nice.
That's
I
awesome.
like
Hope
that
that
you
helped.
I like that you could piecemeal it. That's a
Thank you.
nice,
Yeah.
that's nice to know that you can piecemeal how
Oh,
much,
yeah.
how little.
Yeah, yeah. Especially when, you see transitions in staffing, or someone with a ton of experience is just left and someone else is ready to take on a piece, but not all of it.
Mhm.
Then, a firm like ours can come in and just provide back end support for a little while, or we'll just handle, this piece that's harder for a bit and train you up, that kind of thing. So.
Nice. There you go.
I love that.
Writing on that Carol's note about like the internal staff
Mhm.
remain internal, I was told by a principal that I'm not with accounting department, I'm with
Sorry,
contract.
no, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Can you hear me? Okay. That the principal told me like administrative staff are to remain like invisible, or like we are internal staff. It's the project managers who go after clients for external communication. So I was like, okay, I'll remain invisible. I like that.
Well, that's another strategy. Yeah.
That's kind of interesting because I'm kind of the opposite in our office. Like, I find it easier to go directly to their billing person
Mhm.
when discussing billing and kind of like that. So if I can get an in with someone like that, we can talk bills. We can talk payments, stuff like that. It kind of circumvents the people that maybe outside of it that don't run that way. So, kind of leave the principals and project managers out of it, and we'll just kind of discuss. It works well with certain people.
I really take your point, Renee, about knowing some resources to backfill the pieces you don't have yet. Because I think a big thing we're talking about this year in STA is skilling up people and making sure that admins have a career path. And there may be someone who, would never have dreamed that they'd be doing accounting, but they are expanding their office manager role. And all of a sudden it's like the person who was doing invoicing is gone. It's like, oh, do you want to do invoicing? And I think that statement would be very alarming to someone who was not responsible for receivables in the past, but being able to do it as a team, like, okay, like Renee's gonna show you the ropes for a quarter, and like you're gonna take over the hourly bills. And then once you've got that, you're gonna take over the fixed fee bills, and like having some sort of partner to break it down. I could see really helping someone expand their job role if that's what they want.
And not just for admin, back to what Patrick was saying, it can also support, a PM who's not necessarily great at billing or new to billing. So you have accounting support who can coach them through it the first few times. And then a year later, they're handling that AR call just like you want them to.
They're not saying, oh, don't worry about it. Sorry, I brought it up.
Yeah, we just draw for free.
I recently hired a virtual assistant that came from Jess Hickey, actually. So she uses her as a virtual assistant. So I've been having her send out invoices for me and starting to follow up on ARs. So that's been a huge relief. So if you need the help and maybe there's not a budget for hiring an accountant or somebody as badass as Renee, and the option for virtual assistants is my experience has been amazing and super affordable. You save money on employment taxes. They're not getting the benefits, the insurance, the PTO. So it's an amazing, and they'll work as many hours as you want or as little as you need. So highly recommend.
Are you all following up? Like, do you have a process for following up on old AR? Like, does it cross a certain threshold with certain clients or a certain time limit? What are you guys experiencing out there?
So ideally, we like to follow up with new clients within a couple weeks of sending their first invoice in that real gentle, make sure you got it. Did you have any questions? Just that real nice soft touch. Ideally, it doesn't happen all the time because everybody's busy. For me, I look at the 30 to 60, and I know within that, like almost nobody, only a couple people are going to pay within 30. So once it hits 30 to 60 though, then I start to look and I start to go client by client. And there's one client I know they're going to be 45 days. So I don't quite hop on them the minute it turns 31 days, but ones that are, I kind of just gauge it. But that's usually when I start poking a little bit, is when they start to get past the 45 and pushing into the 45 to 60. I'll be like, hey, and usually the first one is Kurt will send a reminder, make sure you got it. Did you have any questions? A percentage of the time they didn't get it, it got lost, they ignored it, whatever. But from there, it of course will escalate, but that's our usual strategy.
Are all of you emailing out your invoices, or do you use snail mail, or what are the processes you use to actually deliver your invoices to your clients?
We've switched to emailing everything. I find it's quicker to track. It's easier to track because you have a record that you actually sent it. You know who received it. So if the wrong person got it, at least you can then follow up on that. So I think that's been a huge help in increasing, or I guess decreasing, the receivable time.
Agreed. You can also send it to multiple people at the same
Yep.
time, including the accounting people with the PM, which definitely makes it faster.
Totally.
Yeah.
For the clients that have like really large balances and they're just very difficult, like after I send the email, I'll print it out and I have a folder of ARs, and I just like keep the ones that are really delinquent and that really need addressed, because I'm usually just following up once a month, but on those I'll follow up once a week. And it's just the really big ones. So it's like I've got it easy to access. I know, I just print out a copy.
So you've got a dollar limit that dictates how often you follow up.
Yep, we've got a trigger alert on it. And we even mentioned that when we follow up on it, it's like, our firm, we've got a trigger alert at this level. And at some point, we're going to have to stop services. We don't want to do that. But we have a whole template we use for that. Yeah.
Dollar amount's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got investors in our firm too. So they expect that we keep up on this. They expect that we're not going to keep providing services and we're not getting paid. So that's also something we can point to too. And it's like, it's not just us.
Yeah. Do any of you deal with covenants with your bank? Are they looking at your aging?
Every once in a while, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it can be an issue if you have lending policies that demand certain ratios, certain covenants to meet. So.
I had a client I worked with who would always, he would make the call and he'd say, hey, the board has just asked me to call up. And there was never a board. But I loved the use of that, especially in this industry where they're reluctant to actually ask for money a lot of the time. That's a great way to kind of defer it, but say, hey, I'm gonna do it.
I always tell them, throw me under the bus. Say it's me. Tell them it's me that's asking. Always. It just takes that burden all off. Yeah.
I love it. I've totally used the board, even though I'm on it. So I've totally low-key.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Hey.
Sounds
good.
It sounds good.
It totally does.
Yeah.
If somebody else will make the phone call, you can blame me. I don't care. Is that your approach, Carrie?
Yeah,
somebody else
pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
For those who don't interface directly with customers, I'm curious how, what internal triggers you're using for when you reach out, even just the internal trigger of reaching out to the PM to be like, hey, are you backing it up a little bit, or are you, to 25 days and 85, or are you, pinging the PM at 31 days?
Yeah. Piggybacking on that, automated statements, kind of the same thing. I'm curious if anybody's using like an automated statements on a certain day or certain aging. We're not.
So we just do a weekly aging out to our internal principals and owners, so that way they have visibility at that level. So that can kind of trigger some conversations, hopefully, if they're looking at it each week, they can see progress or
Yeah,
not.
that's a good idea. Okay.
Depending on your accounting system, I have weekly reports that just go out through QuickBooks. So it's like to the president, it's like weekly, he'll get an income summary, a balance sheet, ARs, and then I can sort ARs by PM. And then every week it goes to the PMs on the project. So QuickBooks is good. Most accounting systems should be able to schedule reports.
I kind of like the statement with the new invoice. So that's like an automatic 30-day reminder. That's a nice, easy one to implement. If you don't have an automated timing thing, you could just
that too.
send the statement with the new one. It's like, oh, here's our new invoice, but look, it still owe us for the previous one or two. Yeah.
There was a couple things in the chat. Maybe I think this would be a good time to just touch on those. So Evie says, let's also touch on why principals may want to see firm service fees separate from other receivables as consultants, reimbursable expenses. So that's a good point. You want to kind of piggyback on that, Evie, a little bit?
So you can
Okay,
start.
I think I'm talking through Jessica now, yeah?
Yeah.
So this was something that I had to learn, that there's the receivables of the firm, which, you know, we're often a prime, we're an architectural firm, so we often are carrying subs with us. And so we have these receivables that are not all architectural fee. And what I learned was that my boss cares about the money that's coming to us. And so even though we need to manage and support the receivables of reimbursable expenses, you know, parking and printing, and then also our subs, our mechanical engineers, our electrical engineers, he needed some information that was like, what architectural fees have we billed and what architectural fees are coming in. And so learning how to either make the software do it or give him that information in a way that was going to be a better snapshot for him, so that he wasn't trying to like do subtractive math during his review of this, was something that I had to learn, and then I could see how it'd be helpful. And I think too that if you're working with a PM and wanting that person to really manage the architectural fee, pulling out like what has happened in terms of invoicing on architectural and giving them that information, and, you know, like, oh, you don't have to worry about the reimbursable expenses or things like that, but this is where you are in terms of your money, might be a strategy that firms find helpful.
Do you do that as like an actual general ledger account that you track your revenue separately? Or do you do it as a separate sorry.
Yes, we have separate accounts that we can
Okay.
pull.
Okay.
Also, our invoicing system is really nice, and we actually have custom reports that do it too. So
We just lump all the revenue into one account except reimbursables. But when Kurt does the invoicing, our accounting system will then say how much of the invoice is architectural fee versus consultant fees. So at the invoicing stage, they can see it, but not at the receivable stage. That's kind of a neat idea.
So we do it. I mean, I do it with invoicing. Is we mark all of our anything that's coming in, or like our reimbursables and our architectural fee, as like an AR invoice, and then sub-consultants we actually run on a separate invoice, so that, and then those we don't mark, so we can run a report that only counts AR invoices for coming into us.
Okay.
You could get two invoices, like my March invoice has two pieces.
So we actually do them all separately. So fee, reimbursable, and subs are all a separate invoice.
I've seen that.
I kind of like that. It's kind of,
Yeah.
that's actually
Yeah.
really smart. So I'm glad you said that, because I do that when it's window testing. So when it's Carrie, as you know, with window testing. So if it's that, I'll separate out the window testing, because sometimes they just will not pay if it's included, if they're like waiting on a failed test reimbursement from a contractor or something, and that can hold that whole invoice up for many months. So I always separate out those two. Yeah.
There's one consultant we have, I forget who it is, but they have their basic fee as one invoice, and every single additional service or anything other than the basic is sent on a separate invoice.
Yep.
So sometimes we'll get like 6 invoices from them for
Oh,
1 month.
I bet you love that.
It's sometimes it's super annoying, but it's not a
Okay.
bad strategy. It really
Because
isn't.
sometimes we pay 3 and then we have to hold 2, but
Right.
hey, they get paid for 3
Yeah.
rather than holding the entire invoice. So
Yeah,
that's
and I've
it's a
seen
strategy.
where it's, they all lump it in and then you try to take out, well, we're going to pay fee, but we're not going to pay this ad service because it's not approved yet. And then, yeah, like, I'm like, we're not doing this piecemeal out of an invoice anymore. You gotta,
Yeah.
we're either holding the whole invoice or paying it,
Back
I'll
in the olden
piggyback
days,
on
we
that.
billed our expenses on separate invoices, but we consolidated all of it onto one. But we used to break them up into base additional expenses, but we went the other way and put them back all onto one invoice for the client.
Well,
having
so-
sequential numbering system is incredibly helpful in these circumstances. And if I'm looking at invoice 43 and I know I already processed invoice 41, it's like, where's 42? And yeah, maybe it's, oh, that was that ad service that we're holding, or oh, that one got lost in my email, or whatever it is. But I think having a numbering system that your recipient can understand can really help with those gaps.
That was such a good point, Evie, because yeah, even when I receive payments and I deposit and record it, and I notice like they skipped one, like I'll copy whatever one they skipped, and then I have a skipped invoice folder too. So I'll be like, hey, thanks for your recent payment. I noticed this was skipped. Might be lost in the mail. Here's another copy. So I'm doing that too.
That happens so
Yeah,
often.
so much. Well,
I
this
agree.
has been so exciting, and somehow we only have 10 minutes left. So we have a couple options. So we can chat about payment terms and interest and discounts. We can talk about fun stories or nightmares, which I feel like we've touched a little bit on already. What direction does everybody want to go for the last 10 minutes of this amazing roundtable?
I'd like to hear about service fees, because Uno has a question about those, and
Yeah, I
we've
saw that.
put them here and there too. So I think that's kind of a neat one to talk about. Who's doing them, who collects, who doesn't.
It's a boilerplate that goes out on every contract. And I was wondering, since I don't deal with accounting, have you really gone out after what it really says on the contracts and charging these fees?
No, we're full of crap.
Or is it just
It's not often that we do. It's not often, and it's more to make the point that they need to pay. I am quick to waive it, and that's a leverage point. I will, rather than a discount, we never discount. I will say we will never discount our fees to get payment in the door, but we'll do the markup with the service fee and then waive the service fee if they can get that check in the door, which is essentially, the same thing. It's rare, but I will say I think we have $85 last year on the books that somebody actually paid. I sent it, they paid it. I was like, dude, they paid my late fee. All right. But it's
we haven't had to use it rarely, but when we've had a delinquent client that was not subject to Ed's charms, which there are very few people who, when Ed Weinstein calls you on the phone, you're not like, oh yes, of course, Ed. Happy to give you that money. So this person was not a normal person, and so we had to start like pulling the money out, and yeah, the stop work happened, the fees happened, the like going to his office and like checking in how things were going. That's maybe that's my nightmare story. It's just like it's very someone who just will not pay. Like you can tell that they are figuring out how they cannot pay for your work, and that's makes me mad, as opposed to just an organization that's disorganized or something like that. And then yeah, I was really happy to have that clause in there that we could very easily start charging him for all these, late things, and have, good contractual basis for it.
Did he pay it?
Yes, we eventually got the money.
Yeah,
including the interest, including the fees.
Including the interest.
That's funny.
Maybe not all.
Does anybody anyone automatically include it just to encourage? No.
We
I
should.
do have one,
feel like,
and it changed behavior, but
Yeah.
I used to work at a firm that kind of automatically included. And one funny story is there was one client that was always really bad about payments. And so each month, we'd have the finance charge, we'd have the late fee, and then they started just paying the late fee. But that's all they paid. So each month,
Well, it's smaller.
rather than pay the invoice, they just wrote a check for the late fee, and it didn't really
Oh,
get resolved. We didn't understand.
that is so
So
odd.
yeah, maybe they thought that was a way to keep us, still working for them.
like
But
credit card minimum fee.
exactly,
Yeah.
maybe that was their thought. It was very strange.
Oh
So,
my God, that's the strangest
Very
thing
odd.
I've ever heard.
Mm.
I was curious on what people are doing for dud clients. So we've probably got about 6 of them, and we don't threaten to stop work easily. So we've started really drilling down into our terms, and we actually created a general condition page specifically for shitty clients. And so in that, we put some terms of, okay, you have to have a credit card on file. So if you're not paying, you're automatically authorizing us that we can pay out of your credit card. That we require 20% deposit during design and the same during construction, and that deposit of 20% of the fee, we will only use 5% over the term of the design phase or the construction phase. So you can't use it all at once on your outstanding invoices. And then we've also put in there the right to stop work no later than 30 days. So we really drilled down. So if we're doing work with the client that's difficult, or we'll do a contract addendum and we'll say, okay, before construction starts, you're going to have to sign these new terms. So I was just curious what else other people are doing for the ones that are super, super difficult to pay.
We try not to sign a new contract with those ones.
I
mean,
I wish we some of them, I'm like, why do we say
Yikes.
yes? Yes.
That's brutal.
I know, it's awful.
No, those are pretty severe. We've
Mhm.
had to do the stop work. Nobody likes to do the stop work.
Yeah.
We've had to. I don't think we've had to implement any of those additional really harsh clauses though.
That's awesome.
businesses, Brittany,
I'm sorry.
are they for profit businesses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My heart bleeds for the nonprofits, and I tend
Yes,
to,
yes.
oh, they need another month. Oh, their board only meets quarter, and it's bad. I gotta take that off, but with the for-profit companies, I'm just like, you have no excuse.
Oh, I know, it's awful. We had one client, horrible, Van Meter. I'm just gonna throw it out there. Don't really give them a really high fee if you work with them, but they weren't paying us. And I was like, okay, well, help me understand what's going on here. You're not getting paid on your end. You've got a duty to collect payment on behalf of your sub-consultants in your contract. So why is that not happening? And they were like, oh, we're not getting paid from the owner because they were the architect. And so at some point we were fed up and we went to the owner, and they're like, no, we paid them 5 months ago. So they were keeping our money for their normal operating business. So that's why we started saying, if we don't hear from you and see it, we're going to go directly to the owner and make sure that story matches up. It's crazy. Yeah.
Oh, that's rough. That's rough.
Yeah.
I hate it when they just ghost you, when they just don't get back to you. It's like, just tell me, tell me the answers. Are you having funding problems? Like, give me some leverage so that maybe I can help. I hate when they just don't return your calls, don't respond, and you leave messages, and that drives me crazy.
And they're hiding under the bed somewhere, like, I just won't answer.
I'm like,
yeah.
Just put it on their LinkedIn page, right? That's the next step.
Bye.
Oh, now that's a bold step.
Oh man.
I've heard people doing that, and not in the architect field, but I was like, well, that's ballsy.
Wow.
That's just painful.
Yeah.
Yelp review.
Wow.
On the accounting term, this has been my question. So internally, we separate fixed fee and hourly not to exceed. They're all on different sub numbers, and we never combine them together. But there are some clients who just, it doesn't matter to them what type of fee it is. They just combine it all and then make it just one big fixed fee. And it's like, well, no, you have hourly NTE there. And why does it matter to some people, and why doesn't it matter to some people what type of fee it is?
I love that question.
That is a great question.
It might need a whole roundtable session on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From our clients, the only time I've seen them care how we bill is because basic services are funded differently than additional services. And so for their banking, the fixed fee, the basic services are almost always fixed fee because that's how they're funded in a lump. But
Yeah.
hourly, they think they're controlling costs by keeping it hourly. So, and it's funded a little differently, so they might prefer hourly services for those additionals. But aside from those few instances, I haven't really seen clients really care.
From the developer side, some of the funding sources really do want a not to exceed. They don't want hourly. They don't want things, they want to be able to know that there's a max, but.
And I think if a client wants a not to exceed, make it a fixed fee. Like that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a lump sum, and the hourly not to exceed personally drives me crazy. But I hear you, Uno, that like people treat it so differently. And for me, from an invoicing perspective, on my hourly phases or fee buckets, I provide the hours. Like I say, 45 hours, this many dollars. And on my fixed fee, I don't need to assign hours to that, right? And so, especially like Brittany's saying, maybe your team set up with progress billings and like they want to do 20% every month, whether they work more of those hours or fewer than those hours. That is much more functional with a fixed fee setup. And so I want the fee type to match how we're going to invoice it and to match how we're going to collect it. I think there does need to be some logic behind it. And really any basic service should be fixed fee. Like your team knows what's going into schematic design, your team knows what's going in design development. Now, I think with other exercises, can you show me 6 parking layouts? Sure, on an hourly basis, I will redesign your parking forever. But then you just show the hours. So I think it does matter what the client's asking. And if they are confused about like, oh, you just lump it all together, then maybe there's more of a conversation there around scope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Your invoicing can really be a communication tool.
That's such a good comment. I love that.
Yeah. I think they like the hourly not to exceed because they're really hoping you're only going to spend 4 hours. But
right. And they don't want to pay you for anything that's not hourly. And we sometimes have to remind them, like, look, we're value based. It takes a lot of work on our library and our knowledge to put these sets together. So it's not always going to be hourly because there's a lot that happens that's not in the timesheets to make these work. So yeah, I think it's kind of, they're trying to control costs and they just want to pay you an hourly rate. Well, you guys, this was amazing. We're past 1 o'clock, so I want to respect everyone's time. Anybody have any last thoughts, final words before we depart?
Super good to see y'all. Thanks for this.
Thanks, Brittany and Jessica.
Thank you, Jessica. You were amazing. If you haven't already, I'm going to put it one more time for April and May. May, we're going to be in person, so hope to see everybody in person again, and hopefully they get the date right this time so we can get fed a little bit. All right, guys. See you at the next one. Thank you.
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Buddy.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.